We thought that we was keeping it real because we was in the hood. First started coming to this campus and I was walking to school every day was that I was poor. Perfect. What's going on is Anton from AntonDaniels.com. I want to give you guys a little bit more insight into my life. A lot of the videos that I've been giving you guys over the past few years have just basically been about the present. It's been about who I am and what my life is like in its current state, whether that be all of the different places that I travel, the things that I buy, types of businesses I've opened up, whatever that current state is what you guys have been getting. The part of my life that I think that it's important for you guys to really know where I've come from, what's molded and shaped me into the person that I am today. And I think that's where we're gonna start. You've gotten glimpses of it from a few story times and things like that, but you haven't really got the full picture. Right now, I'm in my old neighborhood, actually on the actual block that I was raised on. The reason why I'm on this block is for two reasons. Number one is for a future video. I'm actually trying to buy the house that I grew up in, so a little bit of negotiation as it relates to that. A lot of off-camera stuff. The second reason is because I really need to tell this story as it relates to the different schools that I went to and how it's affected and changed my life. Here a couple blocks off of 8 Mile. Every time I come back here, it just seems like the houses get smaller, the streets get more narrow, certain people move, die off. Everything's completely changed. It's tripped out when you've lived somewhere for the first 20 years of your life because you remember everything. You don't remember as much all of the details related to the next 20 years. You remember more of the details of how you grew up. Like, for example, I remember this house right here. It was a young guy named Tori, and I used to come over there and bust him up and hooping. This house up here, I met some of my best friends to this day. Two of them actually married my cousins. We used to just hang out, hoop all day long. My homeboy Marshall stayed over here. Mr. Ragland and Thomas. Thomas was more Marshall's age because Marshall was a little bit older than me. I remember Thomas because he had a game like Stacey Augman, a little bit before your time. Joe was our next door neighbor. Betty lived across the street with Sean, her daughter. Actually, she still lives there. And then Miss Rivers lived directly next door to her, across the street from us. Our house, unfortunately, at this point, is the worst. Well, it's not even my house yet, but it's the worst looking house on the block. I'll give y'all a little bit of history on that in a future video. And I just kicked it with Miss Campbell, so it's pretty interesting. I remember my older brothers had went here to pasture. Didn't seem like they had the best of experiences, so even though this school was closer to my house, my parents wound up sending me to Hampton. I had great times here at Hampton Elementary, or what's now called Palmer Park Preparatory Academy, something like that. And I did really well, even though I was only in elementary school. But by the time I got to like the 6th grade, which 6th grade was still considered elementary school, my neighborhood and the culture surrounding me had started to really influence me. And I talked about it in other videos, but ultimately what it came down to was that my parents recognized that I had a lot of potential and it was being untapped, underutilized. And part of it was just the culture by which I was being subjected to when I wasn't at the house or not at church and stuff like that. So they sent me to take some tests that evaluated my intelligence and I scored really high. And so they decided to make the sacrifice and send me to private school. You know how when you're really young and you're kind of planning out where you want to go based off of where all your friends are going to go? All my friends were going to middle schools called Halley, and they were going to Hampton Middle School. My parents pulled me out of school. I was devastated because not only was I going to private school, I was going to an all-boys school. And that, in my mind, sucked because I was going girl crazy. I was getting into gangs. I was really going down the wrong path. Let's just put it like that. As a result, my parents made the sacrifice, decided to send me to private school. Catholic private school. As a result, I would walk, I don't even think it was a whole mile away from my house, straight to a completely different environment. And although I was in a mental space to where, I just couldn't really see the opportunity in front of me at first, completely changed my perspective about life. It changed my perspective towards people. It gave me a different perspective as it relates to money. Everything changed. The first thing I realized when I first started coming to this campus and I was walking to school every day was that I was poor. The things that we thought in our culture then and still to today was complete nonsense. It was trash. We thought that we was keeping it real because we was in the hood. My cultural norms was completely out of whack. The things that I thought was awesome was absolutely trash. We thought that going to work on the line at the plant straight out of high school, $27 an hour, you made it. And transitioning into a private school completely challenged that. My parents worked really hard, and these dudes that I was around, and when we interacted with their parents, they had real money. Like, they were doctors. Their kids was driving, some of them was driving regular cars, Camrys and stuff like that to school. But some of them was driving BMWs. They was driving Mercedes. None of the cars was raggedy. None of them stayed in the hood. Super huge houses. How did I know this? Because eventually I went to some of the parties and I went to some of the houses and stuff like that. And I just realized that my culture and what a lot of my people thought was money was nonsense. There was something else on the horizon. It was more opportunity than what I thought or what I learned or what a lot of the people that I was surrounded by when I would go back home every day from school, what they thought was cool and what the people that I was surrounding myself with every day in school and their parents and all of the activities that we was doing after school and stuff, it was different. I learned to respect your environment and that tradition was important. One of the things that we had to do at private school was we had to raise money, we had to do volunteer work, we had to participate in improving the community and improving the school itself. We would do volunteer work at the schools. We would have to go and, petition for money so that we can ensure that the kids that, didn't have as much tuition, such as myself, we would go and raise money to keep the cost of tuition low for kids like me. Stuff like that. My parents had to do volunteer work. They had to get super involved with what was going on at the school and in the community. I learned the importance of hard work. When everybody participates in the community, or everybody works together, or everybody works hard, that's the true growth. Like, we're stronger. 2 horses can pull 10 times their weight versus 1 horse trying to pull by itself. But I was still conflicted because I was young. I'm 13, 14 years old. And I'm trying to evolve into a space to where, I'm learning, but I'm still kind of bucking against everything. But at the same time, I'm observing. I'm paying attention to everything that's going on around me. A few more things that I was exposed to that private school taught me, that public school, I could have never got that level of education and insight and understanding as it relates to just going to public school by itself. At least the public schools that I was exposed to was that being smart was smart and being dumb is dumb. Now, I know that sounds weird, but you got to think about it. In my culture, from where I grew up, in my hood, the smart kid got teased. We weren't encouraged to be awesome. If you was smart or you tried to do well, then, you got talked about or you got capped on because you thought you was better than everybody else. On the flip side, when I came here and I was exposed to this private school, it was almost like that was shunned. That was looked down upon. Like, you wanted to be the smartest guy in the class. And it's so weird to think about in hindsight because, I just have to imagine the more things change, the more they stay the same. As time goes on, it's the same thing. Within certain cultures, if you smart or you show any potential, people want to kill that. If you get anything, if you get a nice car, people want to steal it. They want to come up off of you or, they want to down you because they're not where they're supposed to be. And it's absolutely silly. But yeah, I learned that being dumb was dumb and being smart was smart. It wasn't the opposite. It wasn't the other way around. You weren't cool if you were dumb. You weren't, dumb if you was smart. And that was embraced here. I was on a basketball team and I started to get really involved with what was going on here. They don't play no games when it comes to their academics. The academics was more important than the sports versus sports being more important than academics. I let one of my grades fall in one of my classes. It was an English class, and I had slipped below whatever that threshold was to make sure that I could still stay on the team. Immediately, I couldn't practice, couldn't go to the games, couldn't participate with none of my teammates. I worked so hard over the next 2 weeks to make sure that I got my grades where they were supposed to be because I didn't want to be left out. And academics was first, and it was championed first, so that we understood that everything else that came along with that, all of the extracurricular activities, being on the basketball team and all of that, that was extra. That's not what we were there for. We were there to learn principles, values, and to study so that we can improve whatever the circumstances was for not only our family, but for future generations of Cubs, future generations of people that were going to go to the school. Another really important thing that I felt like I've learned that I battle against today is difficult being Black sometimes and not agreeing with every single thing that every other Black person feel. A lot of times I'm surrounded by the majority of Black people, and there's nothing wrong with Black people. There's nothing wrong with any people, because there's different types of people that feel certain types of ways in every single culture, no matter what color you are. There's nothing wrong with somebody that's not Black. Every white person is not racist. It was one of the most impressionable and critical points in my life, and that you evaluate people based off the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's so true. I know so many people that evaluate people without even knowing them, without meeting them, without having a conversation with them. They'll say, oh, it's because they're white, or it's because they're Black. What was championed in Catholic private school for us was whether or not you worked hard and you was a good person, whether or not you did the right thing and how often you participated. Like, that's what got you the points. I never got preferential treatment, or I never got treated less than as a result of being Black. I was never taught to think like that, not only from my father, but also in this school. I'm not gonna evaluate people or judge someone just based off the fact that they white or they was raised in a certain environment. You don't know anything about anybody. The fact that I was able to embrace both cultures at the same time not only showed me the divide, but it also showed me what I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be ignorant to the idea that I had to be a certain type of way just because I was Black. And I still have these battles and these conversations today. Doing the right thing is not always easy. And I cannot and will not ever subject myself to the idea that somebody is a certain type of way just because of the color of their skin. It was a great experience going to private school, and I'm thankful to this day. But eventually, after a few years, I moved on, and that's when I wound up going to Cass Tech. It turned out to be a good thing to transition back to public school, and I went to a really, really great public school. What I feel is the best public school in Michigan, Cass Technical High School. I only had two choices. If I was gonna go to public school, I could either go to Cass Tech or Renaissance. Renaissance was a lot closer, but my dad graduated from Cass Tech, and he was pretty freaking awesome. So we would take that long bus ride, that Hamilton bus ride on 7 Mile, all the way downtown. And I learned a lot, you know, moving over into public school from private school. And I naturally just gravitated towards people that were more like me. I made some awesome friends, and some of them were also from private school, transitioning back into public school. And I'm still friends with the majority of them to this day. I eventually met my wife here in high school. From an insight and a cultural perspective, after I left private school, I've always been conflicted because the things that I would see and the things that I was taught was completely different from what I experienced in real life with people that didn't look like me. Once I hit high school, I just kind of took off. My curiosity got the best of me because I was going to school in downtown Detroit. I hadn't never really experienced downtown Detroit. That's when my love for downtown Detroit really took bloom, because my mom worked down here and then my uncle worked down here. And every time I would have a half a day, or I would get out of school early, or even on days that I didn't have school, when they worked down here, I would either catch the bus or find my way navigating through Greektown and downtown Detroit and really exploring and having conversations with them and hanging out at the Renaissance Center and all that type of stuff. So it was pretty awesome. Once I got to high school, I was completely independent in that I had to kind of find my way, and there was no more hand holding, which I was completely prepared because I had been taught, that level of responsibility, not only at home and at church, but, in middle school, they taught you the importance of community, how to participate, why I needed to be super duper responsible, why I couldn't slack off in school, why it was important to, give people the benefit of the doubt and focus on their character and not necessarily what they look like. Ultimately, my life motto was molded around that time. The transition from private school over into high school, back to public school, and that life was about experiences and not about stuff. I remember when I was in private school, we had to wear slacks, a button-up shirt, and a tie every day. I actually learned how to tie a tie and the importance of my appearance. But the important thing is that in my most impressionable years, I got some of my biggest life lessons, which ultimately helped mold me into what I am today. And I don't think that I am who I am without those important life lessons and experiences that helped me to see things differently. It's one of those things where I'm forever grateful to my parents, my mother, my father, for making a sacrifice to send me there and really advocated for education, because it really gave me so much insight. It gave me so much understanding and wisdom as to how I should move and operate for the rest of my adult life. Again, life is about experiences and not stuff. Don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone or, get additional insight and unlearn some of those bad life lessons that culture or people that you grew up with, or even the people that were closest to you, your mother, your father, your family, taught you to think a specific type of way, but then, your experiences said, nah, that don't make sense. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to explore. It's okay to evaluate whether or not certain things make sense when you really put it to the test. For me personally, I keep God first. I always ask for his insight and understanding and to put in me what I need to know. My focus going forward is not just to give you insight into what my life is like, taking you along with me on my experiences, but to also to give you the insight and the understanding that I've learned so that you guys can go forward and live your best life possible. Make sure you holler at me at AntonDaniels.com. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment. I answer every comment and I read everything. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I'll holler at y'all later. Peace.